How did MTV convince an entire generation that they were rebels, then spend the next decade playing the same skateboarding clip show 113 hours a week? Because they didn't just abandon music videos, they deleted the evidence. In August 2024, Paramount Global admitted MTV and its cable siblings were worth $5.98 billion less than their books claimed. That's not a bad quarter. That's a public confession that the network had been bleeding value for years, while executives filled airtime with endless reruns of ridiculousness. Then, just 2 months earlier, they permanently scrubbed 30 years of MTV news archives from the internet. Thousands of Kurt Cobain interviews, 9/11 coverage, Britney Spears exclusives, erased overnight with zero warning. Meanwhile, YouTube was generating $31.5 billion annually, doing what MTV refused to do: host music videos online. This is the story of how MTV bet on cheap content, lost an entire generation, and left a $6 billion crater where youth culture used to live. MTV faced a crisis that most legacy media companies saw coming but refused to acknowledge until it was too late. Cable subscriptions peaked at 105 million households in 2010, then dropped to 73 million by 2023, 30% gone in 13 years. While Netflix was adding 81 million subscribers, MTV was hemorrhaging 32 million viewers. Picture the 2009 boardroom, when someone first said young people don't watch cable anymore, and executives laughed it off as a trend that would pass, the same way radio executives laughed at television in 1950. But that wasn't even the real challenge. The structural problem ran deeper than cord cutting. MTV's cable licensing deals prohibited them from hosting full music videos online. The contracts that paid their bills also banned them from the internet. They'd already tried adapting with MTV. Com in 2006, offering 30-second video clips and web exclusives nobody watched. By 2010, MTV.com was generating 1/50th the traffic of YouTube. The platform that could have saved them was legally off limits. And then came the ultimatum. Premium original programming like True Life and music documentaries cost over $400,000 per episode and required 1-2 million viewers to justify the expense. Reality marathons cost $35,000 per episode and worked with just 300,000 viewers. Doug Herzog, then MTV Network's president, put it bluntly in 2011, "We're in the business of giving advertisers what they'll pay for. Music doesn't pay anymore." At this point, most networks would have slowly diversified their content mix. Instead, MTV bet everything on the cheapest content in television history. The plan was radical in its simplicity: cancel music programming, news coverage, documentaries, and original series entirely. Fill 113 of 168 weekly broadcast hours, 67% of all airtime, with a single show called Ridiculousness. License content from other networks' reality shows to fill the remaining slots. Cut staff by 25%, eliminate MTV News completely, and outsource music coverage to third parties. MTV is evolving beyond music to reflect what our audience really wants to watch, the press release announced in May 2015. Here's what made this strategy lethal. MTV executives thought they were competing with other cable channels for advertising dollars. They were actually competing with infinite free content for viewer attention. The plan required viewers to forget MTV ever meant music television, to accept that a channel named after music could play zero music and still be relevant. Audiences had to believe MTV understood youth culture better than young people themselves. Despite executives canceling every show, those young people created petitions to save. And everything depended on advertisers accepting that viewers watching their 8th consecutive hour of skateboard fail clips were as valuable as viewers watching new content, that attention and engagement were the same thing. While MTV was airing Ridiculousness episode number 847, Spotify launched video podcasts, TikTok became the #1 music discovery platform, and YouTube signed exclusive deals with major artists for documentary series. YouTube's music category generated 2 billion daily views, while MTV averaged 0.3 million total primetime viewers in 2023. But the real disaster wasn't the strategy, it was the erasure. In August 2011, Ridiculousness premiered. MTV announced a new programming strategy focused on youth lifestyle over music, and began airing the show 8-12 hours daily within months. Rob Dyrdek, Chanel West Coast, and Stilo Bryn reacting to viral videos, a format YouTube had perfected years earlier, now repackaged with commercial breaks. The internet noticed immediately. Within an hour, #BringBackMusicTelevision was trending on Twitter with 47,000 mentions. By the end of day one, a fan petition titled "Restore Music to MTV" had reached 250,000 signatures. A Nielsen poll released 1 week later showed that 68% of viewers aged 18-34 said MTV no longer represents my generation. One tweet crystallized the frustration perfectly. MTV playing ridiculousnesses 24/7 is like if the History Channel only showed Pawn Stars. Oh wait, it received 142,000 likes in 2012. You can't just rename what you do and expect your audience to forget what you meant to them. Heritage is a promise that compounds over decades and evaporates overnight. Byron Sharp, How Brands Grow. Here's what MTV executives missed. They treated their name as neutral, just 3 letters that could mean anything. But music television wasn't a tagline, it was an identity contract with multiple generations. The logo itself promised music. By 2015, the average viewer had watched 0 music videos on MTV for 3 consecutive years. But the name still said music television. That contradiction made every ridiculousness marathon feel like betrayal rather than evolution. HBO understood this. When they faced similar pressure to abandon expensive scripted programming during the streaming transition, they protected their It's Not TV brand promise by investing more in prestige content. HBO Max launched with brand equity intact. The data confirmed what viewers were saying. In 2010, MTV averaged 1.8 million primetime viewers with 87% brand favorability among the 18-34 demographic. By 2018, viewership had collapsed to 0.4 million with just 34% brand favorability, a 61% collapse in trust. Our research shows audiences want accessible, binge-worthy content, executives explained on a Viacom earnings call in November 2017. Ridiculousnesses consistently delivers our highest ratings. Here's what the data revealed. The highest ratings defense ignored that total viewership was cratering. Winning the ratings among a vanishing audience is like being the best restaurant in a dying mall. They optimized for cable's decline rather than building for digital's future. The ratings for Ridiculousness, 400,000 viewers, were lower than the mid-2000s music programming they'd canceled, which drew over 900,000 viewers. But the numbers were just the beginning. On May 9, 2023, MTV News shut down completely. All 25-plus staff members were laid off in a single day. The stated reason was strategic restructuring to focus on core entertainment programming. The real reason, the news division cost $12 million annually, but generated 0 advertising premium over Ridiculousness reruns that cost $40,000 per hour to produce. 1 month before the $6 billion write-down announcement, something even more shocking happened. On June 26, 2024, Paramount permanently deleted the MTV News archives, spanning 1996 to 2023. 30 years of interviews, articles, investigative reporting, and cultural documentation erased from the internet overnight. Music historians, journalists, and fans discovered that priceless primary sources were simply gone. Kurt Cobain's final interview, first-hand accounts of 9/11 from young people, decades of pop culture criticism, all replaced with 404 errors because someone calculated the server costs weren't worth the history. Institutions that erase their history tell the market they have no future worth preserving. Scott Galloway, The Four. By deleting 30 years of MTV News, executives signaled they believed their past had 0 value, or worse, was a liability that reminded viewers of what MTV once stood for. Archives aren't just nostalgia, they're proof of sustained expertise. Rolling Stone built a media empire partly on their interview archives, treating them as invaluable assets. MTV had interviews with every major artist from 1996 to 2023 and treated them as worthless server space requiring deletion. The BBC maintains over 100 years of broadcast archives as both a public trust and a competitive moat. When streaming services bid for content, the BBC's library is valued in the billions. MTV threw theirs away to save hosting costs. On August 8, 2024, Paramount Global announced a $5.98 billion write-down on its cable networks, explicitly naming MTV as significantly impaired. Then, on December 31, 2025, MTV's music-focused sister channels, MTV Classic and MTV Live, signed off permanently. In a moment of dark irony, they played Video Killed the Radio Star one final time. The same song that launched MTV 44 years earlier now served as a confession that the internet had killed the video star. From a $20 billion enterprise value in 2013 to significantly impaired in 2024, over $14 billion in destroyed value. The plan that was supposed to save money destroyed the brand. The CW network faced the exact same cord-cutting crisis with the same youth-focused brand positioning. Instead of filling airtime with cheap reality content, they invested in scripted shows like Riverdale and Supernatural, then licensed their entire catalog to Netflix and HBO Max for streaming revenue. They essentially became a content studio that happened to broadcast, achieving a profitable transition to a streaming-first model. ESPN lost 35% of cable subscribers, but protected premium sports rights and launched ESPN Plus as a distinct digital product rather than cannibalizing their broadcast with cheap content. They maintained their brand as the authority on sports even as the distribution method evolved. Here's what executives didn't understand. Music television wasn't a limiting label, it was a permission structure. It told viewers, we are the authority on youth music culture. Without that authority, they were just another channel showing reality TV, competing with dozens of networks doing the same thing better. MTV executives confused the distribution method, cable TV, with the brand promise, cultural authority on youth and music. They optimized the dying distribution channel rather than protecting the irreplaceable brand. Ridiculousness marathons saved costs on cable, but YouTube was offering unlimited free content. MTV wasn't competing with other cable channels anymore. They were competing with infinite free entertainment. By deleting the archives and abandoning music coverage, they couldn't pivot to being a music authority online, even if they wanted to. They'd erased the proof. Kodak invented the digital camera in 1975, then suppressed it for 30 years to protect film sales. MTV recognized YouTube's threat in 2006, then spent 15 years pretending cable licensing deals mattered more than relevance. Both chose short-term revenue protection over long-term brand survival. You can't save your way to greatness. You can only shrink your way to irrelevance. Peter Drucker. Every major MTV decision from 2011 to 2024 was cost reduction disguised as strategy. Fire the news team, delete the archives, air the same cheap show over 100 hours weekly. The ridiculousness pivot generated short-term EBITDA improvements that Wall Street initially rewarded, but each cost cut removed another reason for viewers to care. The $6 billion write-down was accounting finally catching up to reality. A brand without purpose has no value. Disney Plus lost $11 billion building their streaming service because they understood distribution was changing, but brand equity was permanent. MTV saved millions by cutting content while their brand equity evaporated. MTV became the world's most valuable music brand by celebrating what was new, the bands nobody else would play, the artists who made teenagers feel understood, the culture that older generations feared. Then executives bet everything on repetition. The same clips, the same jokes, the same 22-minute episodes airing 8 times a day. They sold rebellion for 30 years. In the end, they delivered nothing but reruns. MTV continues as a brand shell, primarily licensing its name to international networks and streaming services. The music channels went dark December 31st, 2025. The flagship MTV channel airs acquired reality shows and catfish reruns to a dwindling cable audience of under 200,000 average viewers. An entire generation no longer has a centralized music discovery platform. Music fans move to Spotify, TikTok, and YouTube. Platforms that understand music doesn't need hosts or networks, just access. YouTube's music category generates more viewing hours daily than MTV did in its entire existence. Spotify, TikTok, and SoundCloud now define how young people discover music. MTV's 2024 advertising revenue, $427 million. YouTube's music advertising revenue, $31.5 billion. The network that invented music video culture lost to a platform that simply let people watch videos. The cruelest part wasn't that MTV executives failed to predict the future, it's that they succeeded in predicting their own irrelevance and then executed that prediction flawlessly. They saw cable dying, content getting cheaper, and audiences fragmenting, and decided the smartest move was to become cheaper, less relevant, and forgettable. They were right about the threat. They were catastrophically wrong about the response. Sometimes destruction isn't what happens to you, it's what you choose when you stop believing you matter. You can't marathon your way to mattering.